The First Lady and Miss Kennedy arrive in Rome on their way to a vacation at Ravello, about 25 miles from Naples. It's the first trip abroad for 4.5-year-old Caroline, who is becoming a tiny international figure of note. Mrs. Kennedy and Caroline will vacation at a centuries-old villa, where they will spend 2 weeks. The First Lady must feel Caroline is conducting herself with all of the aplomb of a world traveler. However, Mrs. Kennedy is insisting on all privacy possible at Ravello, so a town reception was canceled. Italian Prime Minister Amintore Fanfani arrives at the White House for an official visit with President Kennedy, who greets the Italian leader warmly. As the two men embark on 2 days of conferences, it is announced that the president will visit Italy sometime this year and possibly confer with President de Gaulle in France. Mr. Fanfani extended the invitation to the president, and it will offer Mr. Kennedy the opportunity to bolster the unity of NATO countries. It is not ruled out that the president might meet with Chairman Khrushchev on Cold War issues. Italy is the next and final country on the president's schedule. Here again, the government is in a state of change, with Premier Leone heading a stopgap cabinet under President Segni, who greets Mr. Kennedy. This meeting with Italian leaders is nevertheless considered of prime importance because of Italy's role in the Atlantic Alliance. At the airport, the president says that Italy's place in the alliance is vital to all who believe in freedom. After his Italian talks and an audience with Pope Paul, the president will head for home once again. Vatican City is one of the last stops for President Kennedy on his European visit, and he is received with pomp and ceremony. The papal major domo and the master of the chamber accompany Mr. Kennedy through the Vatican Palace to Pope Paul's library, where they hold a 40-minute private conversation. Mr. Kennedy is the third president of the United States to be received in audience by a pope. The other two were President Wilson and President Eisenhower. At the end of the private talks, Dean Rusk and 14 other members of the president's party joined Mr. Kennedy to hear Pope Paul read a statement lauding the U.S. and its role in world affairs. He said he was well aware that in the midst of abundance, the United States has not forgotten the high ideals of its first beginning, nor neglected the poorer nations, especially the newly emerging states. He went on to say that universal peace in charity and justice can be achieved, and that he felt the efforts of the United States would bear fruit. Mr. Kennedy's sister is in the presidential party. The pontiff spoke English, one of his 7 languages, during the audience. When the visit is ended, the president's sister kisses the fisherman's ring. But Mr. Kennedy, as a visiting head of state, does not. The Swiss Guards are at attention as Pope Paul shows his gift to Mr. Kennedy, a copy of Michelangelo's priceless Pietà. The original is to be exhibited at next year's New York World's Fair. An historic meeting between 2 world figures who have pledged themselves to a common aim, the peace of the world.
We are deeply shocked by this sad and tragic news of the killing of the President of the United States of America, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and the serious wounding of Governor Connally. And we are profoundly saddened by so dastardly a crime, by the mourning which afflicts a great and civilized country in its head, by the suffering which strikes at Mrs. Kennedy, her children, and the family. With all our heart, we deplore this unhappy event. We express the heartfelt wish that the death of this great statesman may not damage the cause of the American people, but rather reinforce its moral and civil sentiments and strengthen its feelings of nobility and concord. He was the first Catholic President of the United States. We recall our pleasure in receiving its visit and in having discerned in him great wisdom and high resolution for the good of humanity. Tomorrow we shall offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass, that God may grant him eternal rest, that he may comfort and console all those who weep for him in his death, and in order that not hatred but Christian love should reign among all mankind.